Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the 1% Better podcast with me, Rob O'Donoghue. If you're a first-time listener, first time to the show, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Denis Collins, and I hope you go back and look at and listen to some of the 30 or so that I've released beforehand. Please stick around, lots more to come. And obviously for those that are listening on a weekly basis, thank you so much for continuing to enjoy the episodes. So this one, as I said, is with Denis Collins. So where do we start with Denis? He's a former global executive with IBM. He's been in the IT industry for 25 years. He's an award-winning visionary and respected business leader, very much widely acknowledged for significant contributions he's made in the Munster region in the last 10 years. I guess a lot of the good work he's done has now led him to become a lead in the national strategy for economic growth in multiple regions via his IDA appointment to the chair of the IDA Regional Development Committee. He is also a CEO of Smarter Dynamics and chairman of Smarter Senses, where he's done work for Shine Ireland. The list goes on and on. He has been noted for his articles and op-ed pieces in the Sunday Business Post, Silicon Valley Magazine, Connected Magazine. Yeah, I think you get the picture. Denis is an amazingly energetic, positive character that brings a lot to the table. He calls himself a pace setter. He herds cats. Again, it's terms that Denis uses during our conversation, but he gets things done. He moves things forward. And there's a huge element of corporate social responsibility in what he does and what he talks about during our episode. He's from New York originally, and he talks about his background there, going to university there, starting out with IBM, and then moving to Ireland 10 or so years ago. I hope you enjoy the show with Denis. It's one I've been waiting to do for a while. I was delighted to get him into this little studio I put together. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please certainly let me know. And as I said, come back for lots more episodes of the 1% Better podcast. Now, I give you Denis Collins. Thanks. Hey folks, so we're here for another episode of the 1% Better podcast with Denis Collins. Denis, welcome to my studio. You're the first person to be in my new studio. Before I had a kitchen table, but now I have a bit more professional setup.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks for coming in. So Denis, I won't go into all the details of the many roles you play, but CEO of Smarter Dynamics, you're on the IDA board, the RDC, and a board director. You're a former IBM global executive and also chairman of Smarter Senses, which is more of a CSR type activity. Would that be fair? That's a good summation.
Fair.
What would you say yourself? How would you kind of define yourself or give your own pitch of what you're kind of about?
I'd say I'm a New York guy who's now currently working in Europe and Ireland for quite a while. Had lucky enough to have a terrific career with IBM, branched out to a bunch of other things. From an essence standpoint, as the career and life has developed, I'd say a primary motivation on what I've about is, in addition to doing new and unique things in business, I also have a passion for bringing together a collective of social as well as commercial impact. And I think when you find a way to do that successfully, besides doing the right thing and feeling well, you can also drive business. So I think that's a major part of what I try to accomplish.
Okay, good mix. We met a few years ago at IT at Cork. That was the first time we connected, and I've always been very impressed by all the work you've done for the region. I'd like to just step it back a little bit though. You said you're from New York originally.
Yes.
Growing up, what did the young Denis Collins aspire to be? You're still a young man, obviously.
I'm not going to say astronaut.
No? Fireman or something?
Yeah. Well, actually, and I've said this in other interviews, when I was very young, I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be NYPD cop. Okay. So that was kind of when I was much younger. Grew up in New York. Had a good childhood, and probably as things moved on, went to school, did find a passion for computers.
Right.
I wouldn't call myself a tech head with the, probably a lot smarter guys than me, but I did start to find a passion for it, and really on the application and the utilization of it, and how you could, try to change the world, make money. Nothing wrong with the commercial sense of it, but I did start to have a passion for that, and was lucky enough to join with IBM coming out of college, and had a good few years with them.
Did you have any big influencers when you were growing up? Anyone stick out or inspiration?
I had many I had family members. I had a brother-in-law that was still with us, a great man, kind of taught me a lot of things about life. My parents, learned a lot of things about, working hard and trying to make a difference in the world, but, it takes hard work and commitment. They were probably when I was very young, the main drivers. As I probably got older, probably a few sports figures, kind of like the way, later on in life, a gentleman like by Derek Jeter, who was a big player for the Yankees, and always handled himself with style, was able to drive the results. Right. But on top of that, I think to be a good leader, you also have to be able to bring the right charisma and manners to the table. In addition, he was, I think the mother was white and the father was black. Right. And so the combination of all of that, I always admired the way he was able to handle himself, adversity. And, for a period of time, he worked for the owner of the Yankees, George Steinbrenner, who would have been a challenging owner. And he found a way to manage up, as it were, manage down, lead his team as a captain, as well as to deal with the public in general. So I always kind of admired the way he handled himself. And then at the bottom line, could drive the results from a numbers standpoint. Yeah. When you can do that, I think that's true leadership.
And he's retired now?
He retired, yeah.
Yeah, so what's he doing now? Has he moved on to do
He's, from what I see in the papers, he's involved with potentially trying to purchase, with a bunch of other partners, a Major League Baseball team, which is a huge play. I mean, in the $1 billion league. Right. And I think he's been involved in some activity. It might have been the Marlins or somebody like that, I think.
So you're a Yankees fan?
Correct. Bronx boy. So
Right. Okay. Are your family living in Queens? I think they're probably more the Mets, I guess.
Yeah, they would lean more to historically, they'd lean towards the Mets.
Yeah, very good.
In fact, I grew up probably about 30 blocks or so from Yankee Stadium.
Okay. So it's in your DNA. So.
Yeah.
What was your first job when you were growing up? Do you remember?
I do. My first, actually two. There's two. There's one real small, it's relevant to this country here. Probably was around 9-10 years old. One of the first jobs was going down to O'Neill's farm in West Cork and picking spuds. And I don't know if you got a shilling or whatever it was back then, but you'd fill the spuds and you'd get paid. It's like, wow, this is pretty good. So it was kind of like a distant memory. Yeah. And then the one after that, I was probably just in grammar school, national school, and worked for a gentleman by the name of Benny Porco, who was an Italian fruit stand owner. And I worked there after school and on weekends, delivering the product, cleaning up in the store, taking off the boxes and all. This was kind of, 11, 12, 13 years old. So I learned a lot through that experience. He's a tough guy to work for, but he was, he ran you learned how to run a business. And he ran a very good business there in the Bronx.
So you had some lessons from those jobs that you carried through?
Yeah. Show up on time.
Right.
Be respectful.
Yeah.
Do your job. Do it well. And, and then at the end of the week, you did all that. Besides getting paid, he gave you a bag of fruit to bring home to your mother.
You're $5 a day there. Well, I can see you turned up on time for this today, so that carried through. Well done for that. So, did you go to university?
I did. Fordham University in New York.
Okay. And
used to be the largest collection of Jesuit priests in the world. Okay. Now, that's probably shrunk a little bit, but a Jesuit university, studied communications and business, based in New York, and, proud of the Jesuit training, which, stands to you in many forms throughout life for perseverance as well as, excellence. And one thing about the Jesuits that I always respected is they had a good balance of, religious thought, but combined with commercial and business thought, and trying to bring that ethos together, which I talked about earlier, where if there's a way where you could make social impact while still driving business, it's a win-win. And I think it sustains business more. So I think there's a lot of that goes back to the old Jesuit training.
It's crazy, isn't it, how those sort of things impact your later life and decisions and the path you're on, but at the time you don't realize
teachers
that at all.
deserve, going back, there was a couple of teachers that I had when I was younger, when you were saying people who made it back. And teachers deserve a lot of credit for, I think, with the future women and men that we become. And as we grow up in adults, a very, very important role, and probably should be paid a hell of a lot more than they are. But, I admire a lot of the teachers that I had throughout life, which helped me, be a better person as well as a better business person.
Cool. So when you came out of university, what was your first big job? Was it with IBM?
I went into IBM,
Graduate program or something like that, was it?
No, went straight in. In fact, it was called supplemental. So you kind of like were full-time, but you weren't on the books. It was like a 6-month deal. Right. It was kind of a way probably for them to check you out to make sure that, they wanted to hire you. So did that for 6 months, and then eventually got hired in. Did a lot of things in the beginning. Worked in the data center, actually. Pulling cables, even and things of that nature. Busting tag cables and the whole elevator shoot back in the old days. And at the time, it was kind of tough work. But it's amazing how life progresses in certain ways. As my career evolved, and I had the opportunity then to move into more of sales and client-facing functions down the line. The ability of knowing how a computer room worked down to the cable and tying up, and direct access DASD, we used to call it direct access storage devices and controllers and CPUs, and what each of them did from a function standpoint, and to be able to go into a client or a CIO and get down to that level of discussion. It gave you credibility, it gave you relevance, and would help you form a partnership, which I think is very important with clients. It's not just about the one-way sale. It's about collaboration, partnership, bringing the two-way value to each other. So that experience, that was one of my first roles. Well, it was probably tough at the time, and you might be thinking, God, where's my career going from here? It's amazing how life works out, where it had a lot of value, being able to speak with clients.
True. I kind of can relate to that, because I think one of my first technical roles was a network engineer, a systems engineer, configuring virtual machines, and then when I became a project manager, I was on the other side of it, getting the guys to do the work, and they might say, "Oh, that will take a half a day to do." I was like, "You could probably do that in 2 hours," or you had some sort of credibility to actually have a conversation at that sort of level, and then they'd actually again give you some kudos for understanding it, and that helped create a relationship. So absolutely. Did you get into a management role then?
Not for a couple of years. So I went in there, was in payroll distribution for a while, and then they was part of something called the redeployment program, where I moved out into the field. Okay. Did a couple of operational roles in the branch office. We had a branch office model at that time, and then eventually segued into sales. In the insurance industry, first the smaller accounts, and then the insurance industry, and then eventually moved into management positions and other roles as I moved on after that. Across sales and distribution, then did a role in IBM Global Financing, where we put together the Financial Marketing Center, the first FMC, which focused on the mid-range business. Which we turned from a small group to $500 million a year a model. So in those roles, I had moved into management. But it was probably good 7 or 8 years before that all started to kick in. Okay.
And when you got into, was that something you aspired to get into management? You had
it
that
was
drive?
On 2 levels. Number one, it was something I probably aspired to personally, and I think my skill set lends itself to that a bit. And I'm not perfect at everything, but I think I was and am a pretty good manager. And then secondly, in any type of organization like that, whether it be a multinational or public sector or larger type of organizations, the way to kind of progress your career also is to get management experience, because you want to have a good discipline and a skill set and being able to be good at something, but then having manager experience makes you more marketable and helps you progress your career. So there's probably those 2 things in the back of my mind: personal one, and then a progression motivational one.
And when you got into those kind of management and leadership type roles, did you have a clear style of management, or how did that form? Or was it through training? Was it through your previous career?
It's a great question. First of all, one thing that IBM and probably other multinationals do well is they have very good education internally. They're always going to classes to refine your skills and increase your skill set.
Yeah.
From a management perspective also, they have very strong, manager school and if you continue to move on, there's a executive resource program that kind of helps you hone your skills over a period of time. So, the 6 different leadership styles and things like that. So there's a very good basis and educational discipline that comes with it. So that really stands to you on certain ways. Also, in addition to that, my motivation, my personal skill set was I'm fairly good with people. I use the collaborative style most of the time. You have to use all different 6 styles depending on different people you're dealing with. But the collaborative style is probably one that I try to aspire to quite often. Now, again, it's not the sole one. You have to kind of use if one, but that was probably the set. Made a lot of mistakes and made a lot of successes along the way. That's probably the one I leaned to and had the most success with it. One other point that I'll say on that, another aspect that I always found successful is if you can find, and this is also in a lot of the external things that you and I have worked on together, whether it's some of the organizations we've been involved with, from a national and regional perspective, is I'm a big believer of using 3 silos kind of when you're talking with people. Probably works very well with external. Okay. Sometimes in a direct management role, you can't always do it, but you look at what you're trying to accomplish, and the first silo is, what's important for the company or the organization or the entity that we're representing, and how are you going to make sure you're addressing that? The second one is, by doing that, how is that good for the region or the client or whatever the external entity is that might be involved in it? And then the third one is, how is that actually good for the person that's working for you or the person involved in it? Do they have a skill set they're trying to work on? Do they have a personal thing that they're trying to accomplish or whatever? And if you can bring all 3 of those silos together and what you're trying to accomplish from a management perspective, it's a home run. Okay. Because you're taking care of whatever the company's trying to accomplish. You're taking care of what you're trying to deploy in a region or in a country or with a client. And then you're also taking care of the personal attribute of it. And when you have that, there's passion and the sustainability. So, and it goes a long, long way. So, so part of my management style was always to try to accomplish those things. Yeah. It doesn't always work, but if you think through it that way, and then, sometimes you have to use a different management style, but if you can do that 80-20, 80% of the time, that was what I always tried to do.
So it's like a win-win-win almost. Correct. Each of those 3 winning together is a good result.
So it does take an element of your thinking. Emotional intelligence, thinking through it. It's not just barking orders. Sometimes there's things like, there's days when that does happen too. So, but if you can kind of do that consistently and have a reputation for doing that, the pull strategy happens. People come to you. They want to join your team. They want to be part of it. And you get results. And you get long-term sustainability. And then it becomes organic. People start coming up with their own ideas and they want to go there. Sometimes you have to manage to that, but you're better off having that coming at you than nobody.
No, that's interesting. Actually, there's a book there called The Fifth Discipline that I'm reading at the moment. It's about 30 years old, but they talk a lot about that. It's fascinating about a learning organization and personal mastery and shared vision, and getting everybody together. So it's striking a chord there. I want to talk about you moving to Ireland, because this was still in the States when you were with IBM at that point.
Yes.
You moved to Ireland. Was that a big upheaval? Was it something you were really keen to do? Was there challenges in that?
It was an opportunity that I had driven probably around 10-ish years ago or so. I was managing a cross-US organization. I was very focused on business continuity, resiliency, a bit of data center services, things of that nature. And we started to see opportunities in the mid-market, not just Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that we're trying to go after, and created a couple of strategies there. We also created a couple of channel strategies, working with some of our competitors, even going after market opportunity, which was never done before. So we did a lot of firsts with that. And then the opportunity came to say, hey, could we deploy something like this across Europe? So at that time, I have family linkage back into West Cork. and my wife was from the region here also originally. During that transition, I was able to move here. There was a decision on different locations and was able to kind of manage. I was managing a Pan Europe strategy at that time anyway. Right. So I came here at that time, did fairly well, and then portfolio kind of evolved a little bit, and there was more mobility services and cloud services, and all those things started to kick in. And so our strategies were actually perfectly aligned to that, as well as mid-market type of opportunities in addition to some of the larger clients. So moved here for that, and then we did fairly well, and then the role evolved into more of a global aspect. Right. That's kind of what transpired, how we ended up here. So
okay, cool. So you've been here about 10 years, right. Roughly.
Yes.
Like, yeah, and as I said, when I got to know you, it was through ITA Cork, and you were heavily invested in the whole region. How did you manage to get yourself injected into that, or what potential did you see? How did that all happen?
That's a great question. So first, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer of driving social and industry together, right? So you've heard in even some of the speeches I probably made, probably a broken record, and I'll say it again, but you find a way to bring industry, government, public sector, and academia together in different formats. It's very, very powerful. You can accomplish so many things. It's herding cats. It's tricky to do. And as we talked about with management styles and collaborative approach and all of that, sometimes you can't do all of it. I'm a big believer in that in general, number one. Number two, I saw, if you go back at the time, if you remember, we were also starting to move into when the Celtic Tiger issues were, and, there were business issues and challenges and immigration and, there was a lot of issues going on. But at that point, the IT industry was still showing, 5 to 6% year-to-year growth. So it was a robust industry, and there was too much negativity going on. And I do sometimes, the begrudgery does get sometimes strong in society, and sometimes you got to kind of give it a push. Yeah. So there was that kind of background. I was also a business leader for multi. So there's probably a bit of selfish aspect to try and drive your brand, your own personal brand. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Again, I believe in the 80-20 rule. 80% should be for the good, and if there's 20% a little bit selfish for people, nothing wrong with that. That ties into the sustainability thing of that third silo I was talking about, right? Yeah. So there was a moment in time where, in the country in general, that we could kind of drive better branding, better leadership, networking, and then create a set of streams that would actually drive results. So one aspect of it was to drive branding, and the other aspect was to actually drive work streams, of which you were also involved and did a great job in some of the stuff. So brought you forward, brings guys like you forward, so who are probably doing their own thing, just like I'm talking about, and everybody, it builds that machine. I probably had some selfish reasons that I want to do it for my company and from on a personal standpoint, but concurrently, there was a moment in time where, and there were a lot of people involved. It wasn't just me, so I don't want to sound like, absolutely. But there was a moment, one important thing that I also want to convey is like moments like that where people are at their lowest and, a lot of people just shouting about negativity. That's opportunity. Yeah. There's, there's a moment to seize and try to make a difference. So a lot of people got together. I think we got a lot of different things accomplished with varied streams that we did. And that's probably what the motivation was. And we got some good stuff done. Yeah, no, absolutely. It was at a time, as I said, negativity was right. Things seem to have certainly changed, and it's really exciting where Cork is going now, right? And the whole European tech cluster that you were involved in as well, it seems to be taking off even at a faster rate. Yeah, and I'm going back to the organic point and again, it was collectively when the group of people were driving leadership from a positivity standpoint and branding, it organically grows. So if you take a look now, the nation in general, there's a brand of, can-do spirit. It's viewed positively in a place where you want to go do business. There's things going on now in Limerick and Galway and, up the southeast. There's a lot more to be done. I'm chairman of the Regional Development Committee for the IDA, so we're working on some things there. Far from being done, and a lot of things we have to do. But to your point, where there's a growing brand and growing movement, in multiple industries. And I think there's subsets of it. There's there's animation. There's virtual reality. There's artificial intelligence. Yeah. So there's IT, traditional IT, but then there's all the offshoots from it. And I think that's working its way into multiple areas. And I do think it'll be one of the things we need to continue to embrace and cultivate to drive jobs and investment across the nation. And that includes small and medium business, indigenous business working its way up, as well as the traditional FDI from outside the country. And if we do both of those, we focus on both of those and keep pushing it, I think we'll just continue to have more growth.
Dennis, that was kind of a whistle-stop tour of your career so far. I'd like to kind of go into just some maybe more questions around Denis the person and your perspective on certain things. It's 1% better tips I'm looking for to share with folks. We talked a lot about management styles. What about decision making? How do you approach decision making? Is there a methodology, or do you tap into intuition? What would it be?
It's a balanced approach, I think, right?
Okay.
So first of all, do your homework. One should be, depending on what the decision you're making, but
Sure.
Have you read the data? Have you read the market opportunity? The SWOT analysis, pain points, all that traditional business stuff, right?
Yeah.
So know that, right? And go through it. And then know and believe in your people and following the type of collaborative style or the balance of the different leadership styles with that approach with your people. So you know what you're trying to do. You have a vision, you have a strategy, you have an operational plan, you have targets, you're measuring to it. All of that stuff has to be done. So it's not just lick your finger and go in the air, right? Hire the right people, apply the right management strategy they're talking about. And then after all of that, there's an element of the emotional intelligence, street smarts, however you want to call it. And I do think there's an aspect of instinct, where you put all of that together, your life experience, your people, what you're trying to accomplish. So when you put all those things together, and then sometimes, there's a bit of subjectivity to being a good leader and a good manager. I think it's a combination of all of that.
Yeah, it's a good mix, all right.
Tricky dribble. You don't always get it right, but more often than not, you will if you do it, I think.
Yeah. Through your career, is there anything stands out that didn't work out so well that you might have made a mistake from? Mistake can be a negative word, but there's a lot of learnings from it. Anything stick out? Yeah,
actually, there's the multiple, by the way. But the better, the more mistakes you get, the better. So that's probably enough of them in my past. But this is one earlier in my career that always stuck with me. So I was kind of a young sales rep in New York, and I was working on one of my first large deals. It was kind of like a $15 million deal at the time, which back then was, it's big now, but it was really big then. And it was, it had international aspects to it, which was something that we didn't do a lot of out of our branch at that time. It was with a major insurance company that's very, very well known. There was one small part of the deal which had to go into Canada.
Right.
And, I was trying to push the deal along, get it done, and answer the questions. And there was this one lawyer, this one person up in Canada that was kind of slowing the whole deal down. And he had a bunch of questions on terms and conditions and law and all of that. And I remember calling him up and, being respectful. I was saying, can't we just take the boilerplate terms and conditions that we have here in the U.S. and we'll just put them to that aspect of it, and let's just, move it along. And he was quiet for a minute, and he said, "Denis, it's like your President Ronald Reagan says, Canada, it's like a different country up here." And I never forgot that besides the humility part of it, and there was no rudeness or whatever, but they were a different country. They have a bunch, not that many, but different laws. They approach their contractual process differently. So what I always learned from that moment is respect everything. Not everything is cookie cutter. Yeah. And people and countries, and as well as coming over here and managing a bunch of different groups, you learn your style and your approach has to be very open and flexible. So I always remember, that was a long time, and I remember that very well. And I applied it to other international type of deals that we did, and so it was a great learning experience.
Yeah, it's interesting that the one that comes straight to your mind, isn't it? And it's a good while back. Habits, Denis. What about good habits and bad habits? What are your good habits? What do you think are habits that actually make you productive and successful?
I'm going to talk about one that's probably good and bad at the same time. I tend to be a pace setter. Okay. And a lot of people, in certain business say that's the greatest thing because you're moving things along. It has a negative aspect too if you don't, again, going back to the leadership styles and how you motivate your people. Certain people require different type of approaches. So when you're a pace setter, you could isolate people a little bit. So you have to be, it takes time to learn how to balance it. You know, when you're probably younger, you just want to get everything done.
Yeah.
I think it's better to have it than not have it, but you have to refine it. You have to be able to understand how that behavior people will respond to. Mm-hmm. So if you're kind of going so fast and not leaving people a chance to kind of learn and absorb and know what they're going to accomplish, that could come back to bite you. So there's a fine balance. So going back to know your metrics, know your vision, your strategy, your operational model, your measurements, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And having that right, and communication. Actually,
Sure.
I mentioned that communication with your folks on top of the right balance of your leadership styles. I found that once you could kind of hone that, it's a very good to have. It will make you get things done. It will make you get noticed from people that you report to, or the external world saying, geez, look, this guy's getting things done, right?
Yeah.
So you want to have that, but it could be, so I'm answering your second question. I'm going to give it to you in one shot.
Okay.
It's good and bad, but you just have to manage to it.
Interesting. Good answer. I haven't heard that kind of perspective. Talking about work-life balance, and I thought you were going to say when you have good and bad habits is that you work too hard and you work too hard. But how do you balance work and the life?
When I was younger, I probably worked a real lot. Life dictates things sometimes. So, you know, the appropriate answer is have work-life balance. Very, very important. But sometimes life doesn't dictate to you. So there's probably going to be moments in your life where you got to work more than you probably want to, but it'll probably stand to you. But once you get through those different phases, right? I'm a firm believer in work-life balance. You got to have something that you're interested in outside of work. It could be hill walking, it could be golf, reading. So very, very important for going to recharge. Again, sometimes you can't always do that. There's phases in your life when you have to, you know, realistically speaking, sometimes you have to do what you got to do. I firmly believe in it. You know, and I also, when I mentor or coach people over the years, I also always encourage them, in addition to doing those things outside of work, to also have a period of time every week where you're managing your own career. Mm-hmm. So it could be you put in your calendar 10 to 10:30, 10 to 11 or whatever, you know, whatever you can do that's not impacting what you're supposed to do for your day job. So I'm not condoning that, but where, you know, you look at what have I done right for the company? What have I done right for me? Or in your own business or whatever you're doing, what have I done externally? Because sometimes you have to think outside the bubble of what you're in. You can be so deep into it and you're running and you're trying to get work done, you're managing people, there's politics, there's all those things that are going on. And sometimes you got to take a step back and say, what am I doing for the common good? What am I doing for myself? How is this helping me progress myself in my career or my personal ambitions? Yeah. So work-life balance in general, make sure you're taking enough time, spending time with your family. Family time is very, very important. You're only around for so long, so I encourage everybody to do that. And I've always done that in my life. Secondly, make sure there's something that you have that interests you that's outside of work. And then third, in your work life during the Monday to Friday, schedule some time that's your time every week, focused on your own career, your own progression, and things like that. And I think if you balance the three of those together, you're probably a happier person.
I like the tip of squaring away a little bit of your own time every week for focusing on your own development. If you were to give your 20-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
Probably slow down a bit. Smell the roses a little more. You'll get there. Okay. It's a long haul. So probably...
And to maybe take that advice question, what's the best piece of advice you've been given that sticks out at any stage?
To live your life, you know, and I've always tried to do this, to live your life in a certain way. So, and again, it depends on the part of the world you live in or whatever, so I'm going to use something maybe a little even parochial, but family, parish, country. Okay. If you follow that, as I've always tried to do, in whatever your world that is, and say, you know, I'm part of my family, I'm going to take care of them, part of a broader community called the parish or whatever, and I'm part of a country, you know, and then you go to world and all those other things. But if you just start with those and say, well, how is my behavior going to be within those three streams? What am I doing to make things better and help there? You know, how am I being a positive contributor and team member? And what have I learned from those groups or people? And if you kind of think through that way and apply those learnings in your everyday life, I don't think you'll go wrong.
if you, maybe there's an answer part of that question to this one. Success then, when you think of success, what is success to Denis, or how would you kind of define success?
That's health and happiness. If you had health, wealth, and happiness, right? Because, sometimes they're all different things. So being happy and healthy is probably number one. Taking care of your family, doing the right thing there. So I do think, success depends on the person. Yeah. To me, it's probably a certain balance of commercial success, family, and health. I think one of my biggest successes is my 3 children. Mm-hmm. So to me, that they're all doing well and they're growing up and doing well. To me, that if someone's asked me, what do you point to? I'd point to that. Yeah. I think that's an important element to all of it. Sure. Commercial is important too.
And the CSR element is big in your world as well.
Yes.
So I'd imagine that's kind of success.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm really passionate about that stuff. And again, that you can bring the industry, government, public sector, and academia together. There's so much you can accomplish. And you and I have been involved in certain streams and had an element of success, and I've done multiple things like that across IBM or stuff with IDA or IT at Cork or chamber stuff or whatever. So, or work with Shine Ireland, where we created a bunch of, with the Smarter Senses model, which moving into autismaware.ie for a health platform for parents and stuff in the autism world. CSR is probably maybe a little further along in the US and other places as corporate or business model, right? So there's a selfish element to that businesses do because they want to get their brand out there. But there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think that's starting to come in Ireland now. You're seeing more and more groups and people talking about it. Yeah. So I think part of any good business leader who should want to do the right thing for their community, their region, their country, their whatever. If they're smart, they find a way that aligns to the bottom line and overall brand of what their company is trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as the good thing you're trying to do is getting done. So I think CSR, we need to give back. We need to make a difference. And if you do that right, it propels your business and your brand at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it can be a win-win. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being that obvious about it. Yeah. As long as, again, if I kind of think about the 80-20 rule, 80% of the good stuff and 20% of the other. And again, that creates sustainability. Sure. Going back to the 3 silos we talked about earlier. So I think it needs to be part of everyone's life in general. I think it needs to be part of the business world in general. And if we want to be the right thought leaders and business leaders, we should all gravitate to something. And if it's good for business and drives jobs, why not? Yeah, I'll give you just like a good example. When we with Shine Ireland, and we got together and we brought the Bon Secures Hospital came part of it, government became part of it. There's homegrown learnings that Shine had put together, and then we were figuring out a way to digitize it. Sure. And we created a bunch of apps that I don't even know how many now. We had at least 50,000 worldwide users at this point. Built here, built locally, but as we were doing that, we brought in some other companies like Doodle Creative, which is a local SME, who ended up having to hire more people because of it. So we created a good brand for the region. We started doing the right thing for Shine Ireland and for kids with autism. We're exploiting the power of technology. And then on top of that, business was getting pulled in and we were creating more jobs. So when you do all that, it's very, very powerful. And if we can do more and more and create more clusters and more things like that across the country and across the world, but just across the country, I mean, it will be a better place and we'll be driving growth.
Yeah, it's almost self-fulfilling. Correct. In a way, the self-fulfilling prophecy idea. Once you get it going and it starts to build momentum, snowball effect and all of that stuff.
Correct. One of the tricks is herding the cats, because quite often in that moment there's an element of people working for you maybe, or a commercial organization who's going to be very sensitive to, what's the ROI in here and what do I got to do? So you got to adjust that. And then bringing collaborative influence is one of the most important skills in life, I believe, and especially if you work for larger organizations. And that's being able to bring people together towards a common goal. Yeah. And herding the cats, as I call it. And if you have to be able to do that, and especially in the early adopter, in the early phases, You got to be able to be a good communicator, and you got to be able to drive vision, because you got to bring people along. Even when, like, some of the things you and some of your colleagues joined in, they wanted to join because they saw the vision, they saw the excitement, and they also saw the personal or company gain that could be achieved. So that's very important to herd those cats, because you have a collection of diverse type of people coming together. It's not just the bunch of people that work for you. Yeah. So that's one of the tricks, one of the tricky dribbles, as it were, to get that. Once you get that up and running and you manage to it, but that's kind of something that slows those type of movements down.
The one thing, though, I think the most important for me, a lot of that is to be authentic about it as well. Yeah. Right? So you probably can see a mile away if somebody's coming in with more of the 80-20 on their personal side rather than the giving back side. I think that stands out, because when that happens,
it's no good. Yeah. But there's I'll repeat this though. If there's an element of it, I have nothing. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. Because everyone's trying to get on with their life and do something good, and that's part of life. Yeah, and again, that's part of sustainability, because somebody could come in and then get sick of it, but if they're really passionate and there's a personal benefit somewhere, it's fine. But to your point, it needs to be authentic. If there's a combination or anything, but when they're not authentic or there's just pure selfish, then that doesn't work, and you have to weed that out. That's when the collaborative style goes out the window. Maybe you bring the dictator style in.
You're tying all of this perfectly together. If you could recommend, I normally ask, a book and a movie that you could reflect on, that you got something out of, that somebody could watch or read, or that they could take something away from. Maybe start with the book.
This is an older book, and I don't know if it's one that I like to reread every now and then, and it's The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Okay. So it's probably hard to tie back to. I just always found it a good read. It's funny, like, how as you progress in life, how your perspective kind of changes. Kind of when you're younger, you're kind of like in that Holden Caulfield's mindset. You're kind of like, yeah, I'm him, I get this, or whatever, and all that teenage younger angst and all of that stuff. And then you start to look at a different perspective. But I guess going through adversity in life and trying to come out the other side of it, I always found from that. Also, the idea of being the catcher in the rye, and trying to help people at the end of the day, I always felt that. And also, I always found how J.D. Salinger was able to write that book from that perspective. And when I was younger, as an adult, getting it, because you kind of forget all of that, right? Yeah. And he able to doing that as an adult was, I found very skillful from
bring you right back
from a writer's standpoint.
Yeah,
that I think that kind of stands. And the correlation of that, probably kind of funny. Something with my kids about this the other day. So my thing when I was that age, when I was in grammar school, as we call it, national school, was instead of being the catcher in the rye, I wanted to be the guy that cut the holes in the chain fences, like for different playgrounds, say around in the New York City areas, there'd be kind of basketball courts and everything where there'd be holes cut in chain fence somewhere where you kind of go through rather than have to go through the other side. So my thing was, that's my catcher in the rye. Right. I'm going to go through the neighborhoods of New York City and cut the holes and go for the playground so the kids have an easier way to get in rather than go around to the other side. A kind of crazy metaphor. But
before we wrap up, Dennis, just maybe give a shout out of how people can learn more about you, get in touch with you. Is there anything you'd like to talk about just before we wrap up?
I've been appointed to chair the IDA Regional Development Committee, and there's a great team. I think the IDA does a wonderful job for the nation. A very passionate, learned group that's providing a lot of results. We're looking very closely how we can continue to drive that success across multiple regions across the country. I do think it's a balance of traditional FDI, larger companies, as well as indigenous companies, and trying to figure out how you bring a group together. So it can't just be one organization, and it can't just be the government will provide, which I think a lot of people do here. I think there's a combination of IDA, Enterprise Ireland, county councils, private industry, public sector, various different influencers. So we're working on a lot of different models to drive that. We're seeing a lot more success in a lot of different regions. We need to do a lot more. But Sligo, there's some great stuff going on. Limerick, there's stuff going on. Need to start looking at more other regions, border areas, and
Midlands, Longford.
Midlands, and Athlone. But I think places like Athlone are diamonds in the rough, where you could drive employment from Roscommon and in the west. They can compute there as well as from Dublin.
Yeah.
And so we need to do more and more in aligning to bring ITs up to university level, make sure we have the right skill sets, make sure the right infrastructure, tying into the national spatial strategy that a lot of them are working on in the government. So very complex stuff in herding cats. So why am I telling you all that? I think it's important for the next phase of our growth. Mm-hmm. It needs to be creative solutions. We can't be all things to all people. It's not going to be a big multinational company just putting it in the middle of some other area and have thousands of people. It's a combination of those. So I would encourage people who have ideas, reach out. But it's not just have an idea and dump and run.
Sure.
What we have to do is we all got to have a bit of accountability and ownership here.
Yeah.
If there's an element of somebody, that 80-20-year-old, that's fine. But it's kind of, we're looking for people that will work with us, join with us, not just, you guys should go do this, let me know how you're doing.
Yeah.
If we bring that type of thought leadership and that type of collaborative model as well as the organic style, I think we'll see more success in things like you and I have done in the past in this region. So I'd encourage people to reach out to me there. We're really excited about that, and we're looking to do more and more.
Get in touch over LinkedIn. It's probably easiest.
Yeah, LinkedIn is, it's easy to find me.
Yeah, and I can certainly attest to say if you come with an idea, Denis will give you a great platform to bring that forward, but be prepared to put some of your own stamp on it and bring it forward as well.
Exactly.
Because that's where you get the goodness, because I've learned from experience.
Yeah.
With Denis,
and you know what?
In a good way, obviously.
I'm not a genius. I'm just saying, I'm probably good at herding the cats and getting stuff done. But that's a collaboration. And, come with an idea, but own it. I think there's a lot of people with great ideas and they want to dump and run. So we're looking for people like that. Well, that will come. And again, if there's something that's personally good for them, we'll kind of take a look at that. So it's legal and things of that nature. Yeah. But I would encourage people to do that.
Brilliant. So Denis took lots of good stuff out of there. The Pareto principle is right at the top of the 80-20 rule. Collaboration. When I listen to this back, put the show notes together, I know I'll again learn something from it. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You were on my list from the very start. I know we were hoping to do this at some point sooner, but we got there.
Yeah.
So thanks a million.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job, by the way, with your podcast. They're very interesting. You're adding value to the region and leadership. It's always been a pleasure working with you. So thanks for all you're doing.
Great, Denis. Thanks so much. Hey folks, you got to the end of another show. Thank you for persisting. I hope you enjoyed it as much as the others. So I'm just going to put a quick shout out for feedback. You can get in touch with me through the site. You can get in touch through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all on the robofthegreen.ie site, and you can take it from there. Also, I'd love if you listen to on iTunes, leave a comment, give us a score out of 5 on the stars that are so much commonplace these days. I would really appreciate that if you did it. Whether it's good or bad, I can certainly take that. We'll make some improvements as we go. And yeah, I'll keep it short. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to having you back for some more 1% Better podcasts in the future. Thank you, and good luck.